I'm going to get started now. My name is Christine Townsend of PIO Toolkit. I want to thank you so much for joining us. As ever, with any PIO Toolkit comms surgery, it's an open house. We love to take questions. Feel free to ask questions, or if you have comments in the chat, put them there. I'd be grateful. You know, we're here to help you. So this is your opportunity to get direct access to two wonderful experts who I will introduce shortly. If you could put in the chat, just say who you are, what you do, where you're from, I would really appreciate it. Chat hopefully is working. I just want to make sure. Here we go. I have now fixed the chat. I do this every time. You think I'd learn by now. You should be able to chat and just say hi, let us know whereabouts you are in the world. So without further ado, I'm going to do very brief intros because I've got two very interesting people with me who can only do it best themselves. I wouldn't do them a good service if I introduced them. So firstly, we have Rob Keller. And we also have Paula Marie Janetta. So perhaps we could start with you, Paula Marie. Tell us who you are, where you are, what you do, and why you're with us today.
Wonderful. Well, hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm just so delighted to be here today with yourself, Christine, and Rob Keller on the PIO Toolkit webinar, and really to engage in the conversation about cross-border communications during emergencies. I am participating from beautiful Niagara region, which is a cross-border partner with New York State. And Rob and I just love talking about public information officers and their critical role in emergencies, really significantly enhancing the ability to preserve lives and safeguard properties. So thank you so much for your very kind invitation. Just a little bit about me. I am the proud former president of the Ontario Association of Emergency Managers, and I'm now the vice president of operations. A little bit about OAEM. We are Canada's largest emergency management and business continuity professional association. And very relevant to today's conversation is that our community is comprised of Ontario's diverse multi-sector public, private industry, non-government, and Indigenous professional and student community. And our mission really is to be the voice of Ontario's emergency management community in recognition of the profession, to share information, promote collaboration, provide continuous professional development opportunities for our members, such as the FEMA Public Information Officer Awareness Training Certification course, which I'd love to talk about in greater detail with Rob. But what is really important is that OAM's community is multi-sector, and it includes fire, police, EMS, finance, public health, chemical industry, NGOs. And over the last several years, we have experienced a real surge in public information officer membership. And I believe that is directly related to our expanded mandate for multi-sector emergency managers that include public information officers, and also the fact that we have offered in 2023 and 2024 the FEMA PIO course. And we're very proud to bring this level of certification to Canada. We are offering another FEMA PIO course with a stellar instructor, Rob Keller, coming up in May this year. And I'd just like to also recognize our Director of Continuing Professional Development, Oliver Maloney, our partners at the Fire and Emergency Services Training Institute, who hosts this course with us as well, and of course to Rob Keller. So that's a little bit about myself and a little bit about OAM. And again, thank you for inviting me to engage in this conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Paula Marie. It's so nice to see a few names that I recognise actually that have come for this, and also those who do know me will know that I am an emergency management geek. So I'm very excited to ask all the geeky questions about this and about all of your experiences. So Rob, for those who don't know you, and I can't believe there is anyone here who doesn't, could you tell us a bit about yourself and why you do what you do?
Well, Christine, thank you so much. It was great to get to know you when you came up to our first conference as well. I'm on the retiring end of a public information career, 26 years in the Army in the public affairs area, dealing with crisis after crisis deployments as well. And that has taught me a lot about communication, that if we don't have communication on the battlefield, we cannot operate at all. We have to understand what each other is doing as well. So I live in Bismarck, North Dakota, and after I retired, my co-founder and I were talking about trying to get a group together called North Dakota Public Information Officer Association that dealt with the problems that we have, not problems, but how do we train communicators to be better and to have other resources in their skills and within their communities. Now, our bylaws are not as broad as Paula Marie's, but we deal with anyone who is in the local, state, federal, tribal realm as well. So it's pretty restricted in that area. But we're only about 4 years old, going on 4 years, and it's been a labor of love as well to be able to train communicators. I've done a lot of training with FEMA. I'm in the public information side of it, and the L105, which you may or may not have heard of as well. And how I got to Canada was after the Dakota Access Pipeline protest that we had in North Dakota. I was asked to come up to Canada, to Toronto, to give about a 40-minute talk on the issues we had on communicating to the public during that crisis. And that started a process, and now I'm on my 7th trip to Toronto, once to Calgary as well. Paula Marie's group is growing by 600 or so, and they have a broad vision, but they realize that if we cannot communicate to the public that we serve, we are not going to be successful. And going to Canada and seeing the cultural diversity really taught me a lot on how to communicate, because we all have different ways of communicating, different words. Mark Twain said the difference between the right word and the almost right word is the difference between lightning and lightning bug. So we have to be able to communicate as well as we can. So I'm just excited to be on this program with you and to share. I'm not an expert by any means. I'm just a school of hard knocks. I've failed so many times, but I always say when you fail, you fall forward, because when you get up, you're a couple steps closer to your goal.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. I don't think anyone's an expert, really. I'm an expert in making mistakes, but I think that's, like you say, that's the only way you learn, really.
Yes.
I think it goes without saying, I don't think there is any incident nowadays that works in isolation with one agency. It's impossible. It's so nuanced and multi-layered, and multi-agency working is a given with anything now, with jurisdictions across borders, countries, states, cities, towns. But what would you say, and I just want to take this moment to encourage people to ask questions. Please put them either in the Q&A or the chat. We'll keep pushing people to ask questions, because we actually get the best answers from people who have real life questions to ask, instead of it being just me. But Rob, to you, perhaps you could maybe put a bit of a loose definition in place, because we're here talking about multi-jurisdictional working, particularly when it comes to communications, POs. What does that look like to you? How would you explain that to someone who wasn't from our world?
Well, I think public information, if we can't get the message out, what we come back to our life, limb, and property. That's why we exist. And we have to use whatever means we can to get that information out, to save a life, to protect property, to be able to get the information to people. And we all know that during times of crisis, you have to put that message out 6 to 10 times. You can't just put one email out. You have to be able to find multiple ways in which you put that out. And that comes across different cultures that we live in. Maybe putting it out in the local church meeting as well, to put the information out there too. But I think one of the things we talk about is the relationship that we build with our people that we live with our cultures. When we talk about it, we have blue sky and gray sky, or what I teach, 95%, you're doing your job, you're doing what you need to do. And that 5% hits, how do you respond? During that 5%, you do not have time to build relationships. You have to react because life, limb, and property are at stake at that point as well. So a unified response and doing that, and sometimes we talk about doing tabletop exercises with other jurisdictions to be able to understand what their parameters are, what resources they have, how they operate, how do we bring that together, who's in charge as well too. And then learning the different perspectives of the communities in which we live in and how they communicate. And the bottom line is building trust and relationships that I talked about earlier too. So I think pulling all of those together, and no matter where you live at in the US or around the country, around the world, we have to be able to communicate in those times of need as well. And one of the things that Paula Marie and I had talked about was that emergencies, crises don't stop at the border. It doesn't stop at Manitoba when we go north. It doesn't stop with Montana, with Minnesota, South Dakota. We have to have those emergency plans in place. And we do that with what is called the EMAC, Emergency Management Assistance Compact, that many of you probably know about, that are set up in which we can do that. But we want to once again know about those EMACs ahead of time.
Great, thank you. And I know that this is an incredibly complicated way of working. There's, by nature of the fact of how many people are involved, different operating models, you know, and that's why we very much have the EOCs in place. And I wonder if, you know, Paula Marie, you could perhaps talk to, you know, you mentioned earlier when we were talking about that you had now got a new role that's been made available as a section chief in the EOC, as a public information officer, which in my mind makes perfect sense, but to some it doesn't. And so, you know, perhaps you could explain to us how this came about and what benefits you think this will bring to the EOC.
Thank you very much. It's such a timely and pivotal conversation. And of course, all emergency managers recognize the power of relationships, really, in building purposeful relationships right across the emergency management sectors for both public and private sector. And I believe this is why the provinces of Ontario, they have upgraded their incident management system to include the critical role of the public information officer within the Emergency Operations Center. And it's really a key update to their provincial incident management system training program to really include a dedicated PIO management section. The emergency information officer has very specific and dedicated duties. They act as the primary liaison for all media-related activities, press briefings. They develop key messages, and they're really integral into developing some of the public key messages as part of that incident action plan. And of course, they advise the EOC director. You know, they're very much integrated within the EOC, but what is really important to recognize is now this is a dedicated section with a section chief. So we've definitely come a long way to really understand some of the criticality of the functions of the PIO within Ontario.
And can I ask how that section chief is appointed or chosen for that role?
Oh, yes, thank you. That's an excellent question. Well, first of all, we can look at the Ontario regulation for the Emergency Management Civil Protection Act and some of the ministry and municipal standards that require an emergency information officer, where every municipality shall designate an EIO who is trained and able to work amongst the emergency management team. So it's a dedicated role, a trained role, and they're positioned in the Emergency Operations Center. So what is also really quite relevant to our discussion today is that EIOs from bordering municipalities can seamlessly integrate and support when there's a call for assistance into a bordering community as well. And I had that experience when I was deployed in 2005 with the American Red Cross to support the Hurricane Katrina response in Biloxi, Mississippi. And if it wasn't for my training in the functional incident management system, I really wouldn't have had challenges attempting to integrate within the Mississippi's Emergency Operations Center. But fortunately, I had that training, and that interoperable type of management system really made for quite an effective response. So yes, that's really the history around the EIO, at least for Ontario, and how they're involved in the emergency operations.
And is that likely to be rolled out across the whole of Canada, do you think?
I would think so. I think it's such a critically critical role, a functional role within governments and within private sector as well. We've seen as I mentioned, we've seen the tremendous growth in emergency information officers supporting public and private sectors. It's a really senior and critical role for any emergency.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for explaining that. And I'd like to pop back to Rob, if I can, to talk about culture. Now, we had, you touched on culture within the people, sort of in the communities and what have you. There must be some standout differences culturally from working with the States and Canada. If you're working on a multi-jurisdiction incident, do any come to mind that really do stand out that you had to kind of work through when you first experienced this, Rob?
Are you talking about in Canada or within?
Yeah, so
okay.
If you find you're doing a joint response across the border.
Right. Well, I think part of that is number one, and the training that we're doing there, and coming back again, is part of that is learning about each individual agency and how they represent their municipality, how they represent the provinces as well. And that happens here within the US. I mean, we have, in the case of like North Dakota, I'll touch on it here, the EMAC committee, Emergency Management Assistance Compact, to be able to understand the way each one of those works and that training that has to go into place. Within North Dakota, working with our indigenous tribes, our Native Americans, to be able to understand the culture there, how we communicate, the trust factor that has to be built up first before we can even communicate. And that's important. And that takes a while to be able to do that, to work through that. And I would say our state does a very good job in that as well. And I know Canada has a lot of indigenous First Nations as well. And Paula Marie, you have the total numbers on that as well. And I think that's a big part of what you do throughout the Ontario province as well too. But it takes time to learn. But I think the key we have to do when we work with other diversity is to listen and let them tell us what they need. I'm giving an example. One of the things that I do is within the military, we have a partner country, and the country for the North Dakota National Guard was Ghana. And we were asked to come to Ghana to train the Ghanaian public information officers and also what we would call Magagia. These are the folks that when the soldier deploys, the family stays at home. The Magagia in Ghanaian is woman who carries big stick. And so we went over there because we were training on how we handle our families and work with our families when they deploy and they're at home and they have to take care of the children and do all the bills and all that. And so we went there with the concept that we're going to train them. But boy, were we totally surprised that they had so much more ways in which to work with families, that we came away learning that we were the student as well. But that's because we had to listen. And I think in the cases in Paula Marie's realm as well too, with the diversity there, I think she might want to talk a little bit about how do you respond to some of those, Paula Marie. So
I think, yes, I just want to, before we do, I just want to highlight that point you made about listening. And as many people know, community engagement is very near and dear to my heart. And without community engagement, effective community engagement,
Yes.
you can't understand who you're talking to. So in times of emergency or crisis, you can't get compliance with safety messaging, for example. And it's just so, you touched on it earlier about doing the work in the blue sky times to prepare for the cloudy skies. So thank you for highlighting that. But yeah, really key point is listening to people and also learning from others. I think it's so important to not have the assumption. I think sometimes it is easy to assume that you know what you're talking about and you're going into places and
Exactly.
you know what you're doing, and that arrogance kind of has to really be dissipated before you go in with eyes wide open, I would say. So thank you for that. And sorry, so yeah, Paul Marie, perhaps you'd like to continue off that point from Rob, and please ask questions, anyone. We've got you know, some more time, so any questions you've got, whether it's operational, strategic, or just silly, do so, put your questions in the Q&A. But sorry, go ahead, Paula Marie.
Yes, thank you. That's a really important point. And, you know, looking back at my career as an emergency manager at a municipal or provincial levels of government, key and clear, timely, accurate crisis communication is so important. But it goes beyond the initial press briefing. It's, for example, signage at a emergency evacuation center, evacuation route signage, other than media briefings itself. And when you only look at Toronto, it's known for its multiculturalism with people from over 250 nationalities and many languages. You know, it's often called the most multicultural city in the world. So there are some key aspects to crisis communications within that cultural context. Multilingual communication, and really bringing together strong relationships in that community to disseminate the information. And also cultural sensitivity, awareness of different cultural norms, as Rob was talking about earlier. And then also the use of social media. Very, you know, tech savvy population and social media platforms are really key to that rapid dissemination of communication. Transparency, you know, that residents expect a really high level of transparency from authorities, and it's that authority-driven, layered communication during a crisis. And, you know, the demand for clear and consistent communication, really an integrated, really cross services. I mean, that's really what the public needs and deserves during emergencies, whether it's a public health emergency, an infrastructure disruption, or really just the safety and security of the community itself. But that's really critical, really to understand your audience and be able to really relate to their language, their culture, and their unique communities and their needs.
Absolutely. Stakeholder mapping's where it's at. That's one of my things I love as well. I'm interested from your perspective though, when you're integrating comms with emergency management, what challenges are there? Because when I know that I would struggle with the fact that I needed to get information out as soon as possible, but of course the person that I was working alongside, who was more in the emergency management side, would not let me release information. So we always had the same outcome in mind, but right at that point we had different perspectives and different priorities. How have you overcome that? And what would be your advice to people when they're out there? Inevitably, heads will butt sometimes, no matter how much process and policy and procedure you have in place. What's your advice for people who struggle with that?
In my experience, thank you very much. In my experience, it really comes down to applied lessons learned. One very important factor is the creation of multi-sector PIO committees or networks that meet on a regular basis to share experiences and best practices, really developing that professional network and a common approach to incident management. And really the critical points of contact, and feel comfortable communicating across border. And really, it's all about the focus on the timely prioritization of crisis communications and how to layer the communications, but to ensure that there is a consensus. There is clear crisis communication messaging that is approved across the various services. And that in itself is a challenge. At one hand, you're communicating with the public who has very high expectations around timely communication, receiving directives. And as the situation is evolving at the very same time with multi-sectors, you may have a very serious rail incident, for example, with a unified command, and those messages, those directives are coming from the site itself. They have to make their way up into the EOC in order for the command and the PIO to articulate those messages out to the public. So it's really the timing, it's the review, the approval of those messages, and also meeting the public's expectations. But I would like to say that one of the most important ways to overcome that challenge is to develop these networks across sectors for crisis communicators.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you for that. It's yeah, we'll come back to a couple of points you made, but I wondered, Rob, if you could add to that as well. So I'm sure you have many experiences that you can share around that.
Well, I think the key is, we talked about it, is the relationships that we build within the FEMA course that I teach there in Toronto, and one of which we have actually exercise at the end of the course. It's how to set up a joint information center. And when you have folks come from different municipalities, different agencies, and bring them all together into one area, it can be dynamic. It can be, and one of the things that I do is, if you are the lead person who's leading that Joint Information Center, or JIC as we call it, one of the things that I teach is, when you come through that door, you check your ego at the door. It's not the place to have people with egos in there, because we have a mission to do, a job to do. And that job is extremely important to get that information out. But it comes back to what Paula referred to as one message, one voice. If we were to bring, and all of you know this as well too, but to reiterate, if we bring a JIC together with 15 different municipalities or agencies, and if we had to put out 15 different messages, can you believe how the public would be totally confused by 15 different emails and social media posts that are happening to make total confusion? And during a crisis, as I mentioned, we need that one common message. And so that one message, one voice. Now, we're still autonomous back to our agencies, but for this time that we're working on, it's important that we pull together in that. And one of the things when we talk about the incident command system, and I think this is the same in Canada as well, is that the public information officer in an incident command system falls under the guidance of the incident commander, the lead person. And because we have a dotted line right to them, because we need to be in touch with that person or that agency to be able to get all the current information and get it out there as well. One of the things that we talk about is that when we don't have information flowing out, rumors happen, and rumors can be so hard to correct as well. So that's why what we train at with the class we're doing in Toronto is to get that information out in a timely manner, even though it might be just who, what, where, when, and why. But once again, it's that information coming out from a joint center, from the agency as well. So those are extremely critical as well.
Thank you, Rob. And I would like to, this is probably for both of you, actually. As some people know, I did actually work at a London airport for a while. And the added layer of complexity, and I'm putting this nicely, was the fact that there were so many private sector organizations involved. Airports are, known for obviously the investment from private sector, and of course all the airlines or what have you. I found that to be incredibly challenging, because the culture in private sector and public sector was incredibly, just, it was worlds apart. So have either of you had any experience working with private sector, and you know, what you learned from that experience?
I have had some experience with the private sector, and what I have found is that their emergency information officers are very savvy, very highly educated in crisis communication, really understand critical infrastructure disruption, and understand how to respond to the public in a very timely and critical thinking, very effective communication, and tailoring their messages to different audiences. And really the expectation for major infrastructure, whether it's a hydro utility, you know, whether it's a, you know, chemical industry, they really do understand the dependency that the public has on their services and products. So my experience has been that they're really eager to work with the public sector and government, and there's been so many new committees being formed right now, public and private emergency management committees, and integrated crisis communication plans, which is really so critical to sort of that joint decision making, tailoring messages to different audiences, and coming together during a major conference call, for example, in an EOC. We see various ministries having seats within a provincial EOC, and now private sector. So that's really an indicator of progress and integration.
And I think, Paul Marie, when we're teaching the class there, we had a lot of the private or colleges, universities, other agencies that have been in that class that were not members of OEM, but were there because they needed to find out what they would do in an emergency to be able to communicate or integrate within the standard that Canada has for bringing all the emergency managers together as well. And it's that education, it comes back to, we talked about before, was relationships. I know here in North Dakota, we have an exercise a couple years ago with the refinery that we have here of a major spill. And the agencies that came together, the private as well as the government and the local state agencies, to be able to integrate and to know the resources that each of those agencies have, and to talk about that. It was a tabletop exercise, but it was actually functional, working on the Missouri River as well, and doing some series of training there as well too. And that was very beneficial because it gave us where the gaps were and what the gaps were and how we had to respond to solve that. And that was extremely important as we learned from that as well. We always try to do after action reports with that, but the private sector is extremely important. We could not operate without them as well.
Rob, I'm so glad that you raised that really important point, is that we see an integration or a convergence between emergency managers and business continuity professionals as well. And typically, a business continuity manager is involved with private sector disaster recovery. And really, that's where the hub of the PIOs came from, with the last offering of the PIO FEMA course. So we're receiving such great support from private sector public information officers. But more importantly, we really see this tremendous conversion, which creates greater capacity for collective response, understanding both the operational response in an emergency, but also the continuity of business services, and being able to communicate in a very responsible and time-sensitive way. So that's the great news. And really, the FEMA PIOs is a tremendous catalyst to bringing together these professionals all in one room.
Wonderful, thank you. And I just want to say to everyone, we're over halfway through now. So if you do have questions, you know, for Rob or Paul and Marie, or even myself, please put them in the chat or the Q&A, because this is a great opportunity to learn from people who've been there. And on that, and also actually if you have any frustrations you want to share that we might all be able to support you on, please do so. On that, Paul and Marie, I know we spoke earlier before we started this about you wanting to share lessons learned from challenges. Perhaps you could go into some of those, because I'm sure that'll be, we're looking at nuts and bolts stuff here. It's going to help people out on the ground who may not have experienced a major incident or emergency, that are probably nervous that it's not a matter of if, it's when. What have you learned along the way in your career?
In my career, really as an emergency management business continuity professional, what I've learned is that it's really important to exercise and train collectively within your organization, and to include external stakeholders to understand not only the functional aspects of an incident command system, which is fairly universal, but to understand the language, understand the concepts, to recognize the capacity of other agencies. That's extremely important, because it's a sense of reality, right, within your emergency operations concept of operations. Really, is really to understand the various agencies, what their capacity is, what their jurisdictional functions are. And within that realm, I think we set up the PIO for success. And also what I've learned is that it's not simply the PIO from one particular agency, but they're PIOs from multiple agencies as well coming together. So you may have one central lead organization or agencies for the emergency itself, but depending on the nature of the incident, there may be several agency PIOs feeding into some of those key messages that are pertinent to their service delivery. I think that's really important to recognize that, especially when you're putting together a very complex incident action plan, that there's various messages that need to be consolidated. They need to be timely. They need to be directed at very specific audiences. And really, it's the multi-sector exercises, that relationship building, understanding the timely prioritization of crisis communications and how to properly layer that information. I can offer something for the audience today. If you're interested in really understanding, some of the critical thinking and the ordered effects, Rob Keller was so gracious to write a blog for OAM a couple of months ago. It's the cornerstone of emergency management. It focuses on critical thinking, effective communications, and sort of tailoring those different audience messages using multiple communication channels. And it really, in essence, really speaks to this point. And it's available on our website at oaem.ca. And it really captures the essence of really the goals of public information officers, no matter what sector that you represent.
Well, I'll try and get that link before we finish. So thank you for that. Rob, do you have anything to add on sort of challenges and lessons learned from your experiences?
Well, it's you can plan for all kinds of emergencies, and someone says, how do you plan for a train derailment? How do you plan for? It's the theory that we teach on crisis communication on how to do that. And that's why I strongly encourage members of our association or anyone, if you get a chance to work in another area of the state or another part of the country as a volunteer, to go in and to fill in the JIC, Joint Information Center, as whatever it is, take that opportunity to go for that. You might think, well, I don't know a lot of that. Guess what? You're going to go there and you're going to be a tremendous asset and a resource to that PIO who's in charge, because they need people who know this system. And you're going to come back to your state, to your jurisdiction, to your agency, much more qualified. The confidence that you have, that you can go into a crisis situation. And one of the things that we try to teach is called critical thinking. And we seem to have lost some of that in being able to solve problems and we go to the internet, we go to everything to solve a problem. And we do something practice in the military called second, third order effects. When we make a decision and respond to it, that first order is it's easy for us to do. But that first order, that first decision that you make, there's going to be a left or right, good, bad, or whatever. And it's hard for a lot of people to think, okay, what's the second effect of that decision? And the decision we make in the second one, it's going to create a third effect. And you have to look into that crystal ball, and you have to be able to see what could happen, because indirectly we have to respond to the emergency manager or to the incident commander. He's going to ask us, hey, PIO, what do you think we should do to get the information out? Well, we have to know all the information as much as we can and be able to look past that. And by making that decision, that's going to cause this piece as well. So one of the things we try to train on with the FEMA class is to do critical thinking in our tabletop exercises and to ask those hard questions. Okay, you made that decision. Why? And what's going to happen, good or bad, with that as well. And then also to realize that people come to your group have certain skills. Some might be great in front of the podium, giving the speeches or giving the briefing, etc. Others might be good at looking at the resources and finding information, researching, etc. So take advantage of that and be able to use that as well, and volunteer whenever you can.
Thank you, Rob. And actually, you've just sort of touched on Stephen's put a comment in the chat there about recommending taking that L105 course and go to, as many exercises as you can to be an observer. There's nothing like just getting stuck in, but sometimes it's easier said than done. And I remember my first incident that I dealt with. I think I hid in the toilet for most of it, but anyway, things have moved on since then. But you touched upon something actually that I'm interested in knowing your opinion on. You talked about the critical thinking. I think you're absolutely right. We have lost that art of critical thinking. And we've had conversations about AI, ChatGPT before. When I came to NDPIO, we spoke about it. Do you feel that it has a role to play in helping decision making?
Yes. And Christine, you might have said this, but I remember someone asked me, will AI replace me as a PIO? And I said, no. But someone who knows a PIO who knows how to use AI will replace you. I remember the classes that you taught on AI and how to use it. And there were many looks on the faces. They've never used AI and all that. But we have to be able to take and look at the skills and the technology that we are using to make us operate and do things much more in an expedient manner. And I use AI. I'm 72 years old. People ask, you should be slowing down with all it, but it helps me get going on a topic, whatever, to do research. And I can find myself doing a lot more research using AI, knowing how to use it, than I can with just going in and doing traditionally way in which we read and go on the Google and all that as well too. So if you haven't looked at AI, I would encourage you to do that. And if you haven't been to some of Christine's classes on the teaching of that, she has some great ones to do that. I'm sure you got some recordings on that. But utilize all the resources that are available. During a crisis, there's so much happening. And if you have one or two people, someone's going to have to do research and find out what the information is, where it's coming from, putting out a press release, a social media post as well. We've been using AI for a long time with our phones and all that. It's just come into this age. It helps me think clear as well. And it offers me ideas that sometimes I hadn't even thought about as well too. I know Paula Marie, I don't know if your folks are using AI as well too.
Thanks, Rob. Yes, we do use that for some of our board meetings to help sort of streamline some of the minutes and some of the decisions that are being made. We do use that as a tool. We try to really sort of balance sort of that human element and take advantage of that technology. And you mentioned something that really is something that we've talked about over the last couple of years, Rob, that the challenge really is the reality itself, that we recognize the public's need for instant, accurate, minute by minute, instant information, and really directives that surpass the media's ability to access authority-driven information while they're assessing the situation. And really their concern is to release accurate, timely, and responsible information at the same time, and as the situation evolves. So that in itself is, a huge challenge, and really to satisfy the public's need for this instantaneous information. And without that, of course, is a gap that is then vulnerable to speculation. And that in itself is another challenge in how to address misinformation, especially during the rapid nature of social media itself. And really, from my experience, it's both creating responsible and timely directives on the emergency itself, but also as an experienced public information officer with the training that they receive, it's also to deliver the crisis messaging with a call to action, a sense of clarity in a conversational tone, compassion and empathy, and really providing a transparent and open way of communicating. And Rob conveys that during the FEMA PIO course, and it's part of that team breakout session. It's really to shape that messaging and to really relate to the public who's experienced an emergency or disaster situation. And those are one of the challenges that I know all public information officers really focus on, and it has to be genuine.
Mm-hmm. I like that term, authority-driven information, rather than just information, because yes, I'm sure you said rabid social media, but I think you meant, well, I heard it as rabid, but you probably meant rapid. I think they're both one and the same sometimes. Thank you for that. I have a quick question. We've only got a few moments left, so questions please, all of the last minute if you can. This is more of on a practical note, because I remember, as I say, the first time I walked into an emergency operations centre as a baby, and was so horribly overwhelmed by what was in front of me. Thoroughly enjoyed it at the end of it, but at that point I didn't know what to do. What would be your advice? I'll start with you, Paula Marie, to someone in that position. What would be your practical, come on, you're here, this is your job, this is what I advise you do? What would be that advice?
My advice is to really first understand the context of incident management system and understand the functional capacity of the various roles and how you're integrated. You are a very critical component of that response, and to begin to develop those relationships where you understand not just your role, but the capacity and functional jurisdictional responsibilities of the other services, and really how to integrate the critical role of crisis communication, no matter what type of incident itself. I think that would be one of the key and constant challenges, and really the focal points for a professional public information officer.
Interesting. And I think actually in retrospect I realize now that emergencies are almost easy to manage, in inverted commas, because there is so much structure, so much procedure, policy, there's a process to everything. And I couldn't agree more. You have to not only understand your role, but everyone else's role, and it is roles and not people, or roles not personalities. And I think when we get that straight in our head, that's really important. And I actually really came to enjoy them after a while. So that's, it's quite amazing being a part of such a big event, even if you are one of hundreds. I think when you see something that's worked well, it's incredibly satisfying to be a part of that. And Rob, maybe you could add to that what your advice would be.
Well, one of the things that I do is whatever position I've held, I've always surrounded myself with people who are smarter than me, who are stronger in areas that I'm weak in. And I have to realize I have weak areas, but I understand there's people around me who are very strong. And once you have that team concept developed, you can do a lot of things, and there's no ego involved in it. When something fails, I take responsibility for it, but when we succeed, the entire group takes responsibility for that success. Take someone, if you're the person you want to grow more into the public affairs, public information realm, find someone, ask them, can you be their mentor, or can they mentor you? I love that piece because someone mentored me younger and taught me a lot of the tricks of the trade. I'm always grateful for that as well too. It takes time to do that. A lot of times our time is limited, but when you take someone under your wings and you are able to work with them and watch them grow and take more responsibility, and during exercises, hey, Mike, Betty, take this piece and go with it, and we'll help you along with the way. I want them to make the mistakes in that tabletop.
Mm-hmm.
I want them to make the mistakes there. Once we get in the realm where we're dealing with life, limb, and property, costly to make mistakes, and so we have to have that knowledge as well too. But if you really want to have someone, I was just looking at Stephen Solomon's comment of being in the JIC at Super Bowl. Gosh, I would have loved to have done that. I probably would have walked into that not knowing what I was doing, but think of the tremendous experience that Stephen has, being able to have that under his belt and having the confidence that I can do this. So you just got to take that first step.
There you go, Stephen. You've been offered up to everyone that listens to this by Rob now, so it's his fault if people come to you. I'm joking, of course, but interestingly, so I'm glad you brought up mentoring, because that's something I didn't have much of when I was younger. And I promise you, this isn't scripted at all. I have actually just set up a non-profit where it is primarily for women, where we're going to be offering mentorship to those who work in public safety. And doing an online accelerator for them. I wasn't going to announce this properly. I have kind of touched upon it, but I might as well put the link in there because you brought that up. I love mentoring. Mentoring is so important to me. I mentor quite a few PIOs around the world, actually, and it's a great pleasure to me to share that. Like you say, if you can help someone from not making the same mistakes you did, then that to me is great for everyone. Now, thank you, Rob. We've got 5 minutes left. So if there's something that you would like, and it doesn't have to be anything it'd be related to this conversation, but I'd like to ask both of you to tell us about something that, either some advice or some resources that people can go to based on our conversations. I've put the link into your critical thinking piece there, Rob, for people to get hold of. But Paula Marie, is there anything else you'd like to add to our conversation?
Yes, thank you. I would just like to sort of add to the commentary around the importance of developing partnerships. When I was with the Niagara region, I was responsible for curating and updating the cross-border emergency management plan. And part of that plan was a crisis communication plan itself. It was a sub-plan. What was really important in terms of that plan is not the plan itself, or not the framework itself. And it really wasn't even the incident management system software for interoperable communication, but it was operationalizing that plan itself. So there was various exercises that are planned with various scenarios, and really to identify what are some of those key messages giving that particular scenario. And that was a very important takeaway, because that gives the PIO and the Emergency Operations Center leaders time to assess the situation, really understand the criticality to recover and all the different response elements for that emergency. It was those standing messages, given that type and nature of that incident itself. It's to really operationalize your crisis communication plan itself and do that on a regular basis with multi-stakeholders. Because the situation, it's not always what it seems. You know, you have a 911 call and it's a fire, but it's maybe something much more than that as the situation evolves. So it's really the first responders providing information to the EOC section chiefs, and how that information is really assembled, and how it is put into a communication that can be directed out to the public. So my message is around not only building a crisis communication framework and a plan, but to ensure that it's operationalized and validated by various services.
Wonderful. So many good points. And if you haven't got a crisis communications plan, then you can go to PIO Toolkit and we can help you with that. But no, that's you made so many good points there. So and Rob, how about you? Just to wind up, we've got a couple of minutes, something you can leave us with.
If you think you can, or if you think you can't, you're absolutely right. And it goes to a lot of things that we do. It all starts up here. And I know the type of people that are emergency managers and PIOs, we like the engagement, we like the excitement of happening, and we feel accomplished that we have done something at the end of the day, and we save lives. And it's something that we all love and look at. And so to continue on your public information career, the L105 is an excellent one. Check with your emergency services within your state. Get that course. There's no cost to that. Then go on to the next one as well, and keep going. And then also, if you have a local organization in your state, belong to that, because there's a lot of resources, a lot of people in there that'd be willing to take you under their wings and help you along.
Wonderful. Well, I thoroughly enjoyed myself, and I want to thank you both so much wisdom and experience that I'm sure we've only scratched the surface. But I know you're both on LinkedIn, and I'm sure you'd be happy to take any questions from people separately. You know, I'm grateful for all you do. Both of you have worked tirelessly on this, and you can tell that it's something you're both very passionate about, and I've learned some things as well, which is always great. So thank you both. I want to thank everyone who made the time out of their very busy days to join us live. Recording of this will be available. I'll drop you an email afterwards. But as ever, thanks for your support of PIO Toolkit. Thank you for joining us. And if anyone needs anything, they always know where to get hold of me. So thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your week.